So if you are a wife and you have borderline personality disorder, then this video is for you. And even if you are a girlfriend and in a serious committed relationship, then this video is for you as well. I'm actually going to share 3 tips from my own personal perspective on how to try to navigate your life living with borderline personality disorder, as well as living with your spouse or boyfriend. How do we manage the two at the same time? So those tips are coming to you next. Well, hey to all my BPD wives and girlfriends out there. Thanks so much for checking out this video. So I'm Joelle Anthony, and I have been living with misdiagnosed and undiagnosed borderline personality disorder for 32 years now. So needless to say, I have a lot to say. And in this video, I'm going to share with you 3 tips from my own personal perspective and how I've been able to manage being a wife while also trying to navigate my borderline. And before I get into these tips, I did want to share with you a couple of things. First off, I want to encourage you to remember that one of our symptoms as borderlines is an ongoing pattern of unstable relationships. So it's inevitable that your relationships are going to be chaotic at some point or another. And chances are, if you have borderline and you're watching this, you know it is very difficult to stay in a long-term committed relationship as borderlines. And so if you are in a long-term relationship, marriage, hats off to you, because it is very hard to deal with all the symptoms that we deal with, and then add to that mix another human being that we're living with on a day-to-day basis. So just always remember that that is one of your symptoms. You want to be super mindful of it. You know that we as borderlines tend to have that I love you 1 minute and then I hate you another minute with our spouse or boyfriend. We have a lot of idealization going on and devaluation. We push and pull. So we have to really be mindful that that is going to show its ugly face from time to time. So just remember that, okay? And another thing that I want to share with you before my tips is I just wanted to give you guys a little bit of background knowledge on me as a wife. I've actually been married a little over 9 years now, and that's a super long time with somebody who has borderline. It's not been easy. It has been, a hot mess at times, but I wanted to let you know that before that, I have actually been in far too many relationships that I even want to talk about in this video. But I did have actually 3 romantic relationships that lasted a year or more. My son's father, I was actually with him for 15 years. But in all of those relationships, I didn't have the borderline diagnosis. I had a bipolar. So, I did have a lot of unstable relationships, just chaos all the time in all of my romantic relationships. I had no clue what was going wrong. It was just so chaotic for me all the time. So again, looking back now, I can clearly see what was going on, because of my personality disorder. I can see, why I was feeling the way that I was and why everything was just crumbling down on me all the time with my relationships. So I married again, like a little over 9 years now. And I actually met my husband on eHarmony. That's still a thing. I think there's a lot of internet dating going on now, but I met him a little over 10 years ago on eHarmony. And I would like to say that when we first got married, everything was just so wonderful. But when I first met him, he didn't see a lot of my symptoms. I was super charming. I mean, of course, I am a charming. I do have a degree in charm. So he saw that, and he didn't see any of those symptoms until about a couple months in, because us with borderline, most of our symptoms are not going to show their ugly face early on. It does take a little bit of time to get to know another person and build that trust. But once we build the trust with you, the game is on, right? We are going to just be our true, authentic, borderline selves. So after a couple of months, my husband started to see these things that, I was doing and saying, and this pattern of behavior, and it was questionable for him. He was like, I'm not sure. But we worked through it, and he did marry me, thankfully. And again, I'm not going to say that it was great. Years after that, it's been a hot mess, but it is actually getting much better. And you just got to push past it. If you want to have a successful relationship, you need to push past your pain and push past your borderline. Again, it's not easy. It's going to be hard. So that's a little bit of background information on me. So I'm going to get into my tips now. So my tip number 1 for you wives and girlfriends on how to manage borderline and your person in your life is you want to be sure that you are communicating with them. So of course, we all know the key to a successful marriage relationship is communication. So, us borderlines, we tend to be super transparent. I know that I love talking to people and telling them everything that I'm feeling. So I don't have a problem with communicating. Sometimes I do shut down depending on, what kind of day I'm having. But you want to be sure that you're communicating with your partner what's going on. And obviously they should know that you have borderline. And if they don't know, I don't know how you can hide it from them. I guess you can. I mean, I can probably hide it I hid it for a couple months, but I didn't know I had borderline back then. So, chances are that if you are close to them, they do know you have borderline. So make sure that you are telling them that you have borderline first and foremost, and that you're talking to them about it, letting them know what it's about so they can understand a little bit more information on it. It is very hard for someone who doesn't have a personality disorder to really gauge what's going on up here. They don't see things the way that we see, the black and white. It's really hard. They get confused a lot. So make sure you are communicating with them when you are having a bad day, when things are just not going good for you. Make sure that you're letting them know, and make sure that you are just, again, I said this in my previous video, you just don't want to use your borderline as an excuse for poor behavior. You want to make sure that they understand what you're going through. Just talk to them. If you have a close relationship, you should be communicating with your spouse of what's going on. So, be open to communicating with them about things that are going on with you and your mental health. So number 1 is communicate with your spouse or partner. Number 2, I actually spoke about this one in my previous video. You just got to try not to be so selfish and self-absorbed with problems all the time. You don't want to be, again, talking to your spouse and acting out, all things borderline all the time. And, I understand that we are going to have bad days, but you want to try to find, a way to get yourself through what you're going through. Hopefully you're seeing a therapist and you're working through some stuff. You just don't want to be self-consumed with all things going on with you. You want to invest in your spouse or partner. If you do want to have a successful relationship, you want to make sure that you are thinking about their needs and their wants and trying to incorporate them in your life, and not just isolating yourself and having, pity parties all the time. You want to make sure that you are thinking about them. And I'm not saying that you've got to just be over the top with them and just never think about what's going on with you, but you don't want it to get into the habit where you are just selfish and closed off to them. And I know it's hard because sometimes we don't want to give in to our spouse and we just are not feeling it. But part of being in a relationship is being uncomfortable. And if you want to have success, sometimes you just have to push through the pain and push through your borderline, regardless if you feel like it or not. But of course, if you are struggling and having a really hard time, again, that goes back to my tip number 1, communicate that with your spouse. So my tip number 3, actually spoke about this in my previous video. Now, your husband or your boyfriend should not be your therapist. And of course, you can talk to them about things that are going on. You should be. If you are really struggling and having a lot of problems and that you can't control, they should be the first one to know about it. But definitely, talk to them about, what's going on in therapy, and talk to them about things that you are struggling with. But you don't want to talk to them about your problems all the time. You don't want to get into that habit. I mean, I have gotten into that habit where I love to call my husband or send him an email and be like, I've got this thing going on. Can you help me fix it? And my husband's a fixer. So he's going to help me fix the problem. But then the problem is I just become so emotionally, I don't know what we're emotionally handicapped or retarded. So I don't know how to think for myself at times. I sometimes have to just ask my husband, what should I do? So you don't want to get into the habit of asking for their advice, because your spouse or your boyfriend, they are going to get worn out if you are constantly talking to them about your problems and asking them for advice. Now, there's a limit. Be sure you have your limits and know your boundaries with your spouse or your partner, right? You don't want to be, every time something's going wrong in your life, to be going to them again. They're going to get worn out, and it's going to be a lot for them, and most men can't really, they can't absorb all the things that are going on in a woman's mind anyways. It's way too much for them. So you want to make sure with that you have a good support system outside of your spouse or boyfriend, that you have someone that you can call or go to when things are really difficult for you. And that could be a parent, that can be a sibling, a really good friend, a coworker, someone else other than your spouse or boyfriend that you can go to with things that you just need to talk through. And of course, you should be first and foremost talking it out with your therapist. And again, a reminder, if you are struggling with something that is just unbearable, you should be talking to your spouse or boyfriend about it if you have that relationship with them, and I hope that you do. So those are the 3 things that I can think of right now off the top of my head. If I think of any more, I'll come back on here and make another quick video. But I hope that these tips have helped you. I know that they have helped me some. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I do still struggle. I do still struggle with, implementing these tips and not being so selfish. That's one of the things I do struggle with, is just not, being like, pouty and self-absorbed with everything that I'm going through. And so I am working through it, and I hope that you're working through your stuff as well. I'd love to hear in the comments below if any of these were helpful to you, and also if you want to share some tips that have helped you get through your relationship and your marriage. If you're married or in a long-term relationship, I'd love to hear that below. So I'd love for you also to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and possibly share it with someone else that can benefit from it. So I just want to thank you all so much for watching, and I want to remind you that we borderlines are unstable, but we are so able to accomplish so much, and victory is possible. It is going to be a lot of work, but it is possible. So until next time, stay well, and I will see you in the next one.